Going to start by just a reflection on Brother Bassem Abdullah, when he just called me, just mentioned that the number of attendees is low, only few people. Should we just do it or should we cancel it? So what I think about this is the following. The Prophet ﷺ used to talk even to one person. When he finds one person who is willing to listen, he didn't care who is that person, whether he's rich or poor, very influential, very average person. He has a message to deliver. So in his mind, he has the obligation to talk to anybody who is willing to listen. Now, he kept doing that for 13 years in Mecca. A small number of people responded. Total number was not large. But in one of those instances, in one of those occasions, he met a couple of people from Medina, and they were very average people. They were not even the leaders of the Medina. Very average people. And based on that encounter with those people in the Medina, we had the whole success story that we are talking about, the whole seerah and the whole success story, the prophetic of the prophetic community was built on that meeting with 6 average people from Medina. Very average people, and did not have knowledge, did not have money, did not have power, did not have almost anything. Just this as a thought came to my mind, so I wanted to share it, that the person has the obligation to talk to even one individual who is willing to listen, and to share what you believe is truth. And we are always looking for that truth. We will never catch it. We can only come close to it, closer, but you should never reach a situation or a point where you say, this is it, I know everything I need to know, or I have the whole truth. It's very unfortunate that if people were doing this on their own, well, it's okay. If they were doing it like with families, fine. But it's very unfortunate that Muslims have largely abandoned the Quran, neglected it. It's a very shocking thing to know that you have people who have this divine guidance in their hands. It's a manual, it's a roadmap for happiness and success in this life and in the hereafter. It's a manual on how to build the individual with whom Allah will be pleased, role model. It's a manual on how to build the community with whom Allah will be pleased. It's a manual that spells out what this life is all about, how we should conduct ourselves, and what is our job in this life. Yet you find Muslims, because of many things, decided or largely neglecting this Quran. And even when they find an opportunity like this, where few people, this is the best thing you can do, by the way. The best thing you can do is for a few people to get together and reflect on the Quran. Rasul ﷺ says the best amongst you is the one who learned the Quran and teach it. And then he describes this meeting like this as a meeting that will be surrounded by angels, that people just sit down, come together to reflect and to understand to better understand their deen. It's very sad that now we know why it happened. There are many reasons. And one of them, I was explaining this Jumu'ah, that the essence of the deen was lost. And everything is attached to that essence. Salah is attached to that essence of the deen. The Quran is attached. Everything is attached to that central, the backbone of the deen is that commitment, that dedication of people dedicating themselves to Allah and to pursue Ridwanullah, to pursue the good pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, whatever it takes. And therefore they needed guidance and they needed support and they needed that. So that's why they come to Salah eager, very excited, because they need it. They come to the Quran. They receive the Quran very excited because they need direction. They need that spiritual fueling or spiritual charging. Now, when Muslims receive the different version of Islam that tells them that there are a couple of things that we need to do and a couple of things that we need to avoid, and you are good, then all of this became extra credit. You read Quran whenever you can, that's fine. You read it for ajr. It will not hurt. Salah, you have to pray because otherwise you'll be thrown in hellfire. So pray. Regardless of how you pray, how you focus, doesn't matter. Just get it out of the way. Pray. So it's very unfortunate that we ended up in that situation, and it's really not easy to rebuild and reconstruct that building that has collapsed, largely collapsed, and to build it on strong foundations. And that's what we have been trying to do whenever we have any opportunities, small or big. We started Surah Al-Ma'idah last time. We spent the whole session on the first two verses. Yes, the second verse is a little bit long, but two verses that tells you how loaded Quran is with guidance. يا أيها الذين آمنوا أوفوا بالعقود وحلت لكم بهيمة الأنعام إلا ما يتلى عليكم غير محلي الصيد وأنتم حرم إن الله يحكم ما يريد. The first piece is very the first piece is يا الذين آمنوا أوفوا بالعقود. Honor your obligations or your commitment, or you who believe, fulfill your obligations. This is very fundamental because it's very general. It can apply everywhere. Honor your obligations or fulfill your obligations. Anything. You promise something, that's an obligation. You are a citizen of a country, it's an obligation to abide by the law and the Constitution. That's two countries sign a treaty, that's an obligation that has to be fulfilled. Marriage is an obligation. And as we mentioned last time, it comes down that every one of us has just number of obligations that you are managing, including towards your own health, which your obligations to maintain it, to maintain a good health, work, family, managing your finances or your money, etc. Everything, time. And that was, again, it's like wake-up call. Quran uses this all the time. In every passage, it starts with some sort of wake-up call to get the attention of people, to remind them of the commitment they made, to remind them of their relationship with Allah, so that they accept what is coming after that. So, حلت لكم, and then Al-Ma'idah, Surah Al-Ma'idah and Surah Al-An'am are full of rules about slaughtering and the bay'ah and what is lawful and what is not lawful, etc. So, أحلت لكم بهيمة الأنعام, livestock animals are lawful as food for you, with the exception of what is about to be announced, and that's very important principle in Islam, that the norm is for things to be lawful. The exception is for things to be unlawful. So al-asl fil ashya al-ibaha. Whoever says that this is haram is the one who has to prove it. not the halal, because the norm is halal. So أحلت لكم إلا. So the haram is always the exception. In Surah Al-An'am, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala explicitly say, قُلْ تَعَالَوْا أَتْلُ مَا حَرَّمَ رَبُّكُمْ عَلَيْكُمْ. Let me tell you what was forbidden. Didn't say, let me tell you what was halal, yeah. Because everything is halal except things that were forbidden. So that's, as you know, there are some version of Islam now, some schools who are promoting the opposite, that things are haram, is safer, better Muslim, the more rigid you make the Islam, the more taqwa you have, and that's totally wrong. So, Inna Allah yahkumu ma yurid. That's a very powerful statement of Tawheed. And Quran is a book of Tawheed. Hardly a verse or two, consecutive verses that without mentioning, without a dose or an injection of Tawheed, this is one of them. Inna Allah yahkumu ma yurid. Allah commands what He will. لا يسأل عما يفعل وهم يسألون. This is يرزق من يشاء, يعز من يشاء, يذل. I mean, these transcendent, absolute power, all belongs exclusively to Allah. Allah commands what He will. So you who believe, do not violate the sanctity of Allah's rights. لا تحلوا شعائر الله ولا الشهر الحرام ولا الهدي ولا القلائد ولا آمين البيت الحرام يبتغون فضلا من ربهم ورضوانا. So these are the things that are the restrictions during the Hajj and Umrah. So Al-Quran is telling us not to violate those restrictions. So there are some restrictions, there are things that you cannot do while in Hajj or Umrah. So this verse say, I believe, do not violate the sanctity of Allah's right, the sacred month. And there are 4 months that even before Islam, the Arabs agreed to uphold peace during those months and to restrain themselves. The offering, the garlands, these are the animals or the livestock that the pilgrims decide or dedicate them to the Udhiyah. So these, they should not be touched until, I mean, they should be left until they're slaughtered, because you dedicated them to Allah. Nor those going to the sacred house to seek the bounty and pleasure of their Lord. So the restriction is not only for the pilgrims, it's also for the visitors. There are people who are there for business. This is a season. So the restrictions also apply to them. But when you have completed the rites of pilgrimage, you may hunt. So the end, once you end, you finished the rituals of Hajj or Umrah, then of course many of these restrictions are uplifted. One of them is hunting. وَإِذَا حَلَلْتُمْ فَاصْطَادُوا وَلَا يَجْرِمَنَّكُمْ شَنَآنُ قَوْمٍ أَنْ صَدُّوكُمْ عَنِ الْمَسْجِدِ الْحَرَامِ أَنْ تَعْتَدُوا. This is again the high standard that the believers were as a community that was designated to be a model community and a leading community, to lead and to guide. So it is held at higher standards. أنتم خير أمة أخرجت للناس. You were sent to humanity. So they were held at a much higher standard. If other people are allowed to retaliate without restrictions, no, for you, no. For you, even those, do not let your hatred for the people who bared you from the sacred mosque induce you to transgress or to break the law. So you have, this is very high level of self-restraint, especially in that culture and in that era. Arabs, they were Muslims, remember, they were prevented from going to Mecca. So there is a lot of anger. And then Quran tells them that with all of that, that does not give you permission to abuse or to transgress or to break the law. It's a very high level of self-restraint. Somebody hates you, somebody harmed you, somebody almost humiliated you. In the Arab culture at that time, it's a very big humiliation. Yet, you are not, that's not a permission for you or a license to exceed the limits. And because Allah knows this is very hard, say, help one another to do what is right and good. وَتَعَاوَنُوا عَلَى الْبِرِّ وَالتَّقْوَى. Because this is something that unless you support one another, it's very hard to do it. It's very hard for a person to hold himself or herself to this high standard. And do not help one another towards sin and hostility. Of course, these verses can be taken general. تعاونوا على البر والتقوى ولا تعاونوا على الإثم والعدوان. So always, whenever you have chance, help in a good cause. You find somebody, for example, angry with somebody else, don't incite hatred. Try to cool things down, try to reconcile. Always تعاونوا على البر والتقوى. Always try to be part of the solution. Always try to help pushing things the right way, not making things worse. So it was reinforced in first تعاون على البر والتقوى. So help one another to do what is right and good. And then also do not help one another towards sin and hostility. It cannot be clearer than this. So help one another to do what is right and good, and do not help one another towards sin and hostility. And then, of course, again, because this is very high standard, it's not just help one another, but also reminding you of taqwa and reminding you of, warning you of the punishment of Allah. وَاتَّقُوا اللَّهَ إِنَّ اللَّهَ شَدِيدُ الْعِقَابِ. Be mindful of Allah, for his punishment is severe. This is the style of the Quran. This is the approach. Reminds you of your commitment, tells you how you honor that commitment, encourage you to do it, and warn you against failing to honor your commitments. So that's because Quran deals with our heart. It feeding and cleansing. So waking up your heart, waking your heart up, feeding your spirit, and awakening and cleansing your heart, because there are so many temptations in life, and our hearts tend to be spoiled. As Rasul ﷺ described, whenever someone commits a sin, there is a dark spot on your heart, and etc., and keeps accumulating until you no longer distinguish between right and wrong. حرمت عليكم الميتة والدم ولحم الخنزير وما أهل لغير الله به والمنخنقة والموقودة والمتردية والنطيحة وما أكل السبع إلا ما ذكيتم وما ذبح على النصب وأن تستقسموا بالأزلام ذلكم فسق. Remember always, Quran, what Quran is trying to do is trying to build a new community and transform individuals and build from these individuals a new community. But Quran was doing this not theoretically. Quran was doing this dealing with reality that is so messy. You're building a community on a mission in a society that was tribal. You're building a community that is characterized by justice and fairness and brotherhood and no racism and no difference between Arabs and non-Arabs and white or black or yellow or anything, in a society that was so racist, so racist and so, what do you call it, have real clear classes of people who are abusing each other and tribes basically it was the law of the jungle. So here telling them what are things that are forbidden. You are forbidden to eat, carry on, and mated the dead animals, blood, pig's meat, and animal over which any name other than Allah's has been invoked, other than God's has been invoked, anything strangled, victim of a violent blow or a fall, gored or savaged by a beast of prey, unless you still slaughter it in the correct manner on anything sacrificed on idolatrous altars. So tells you that all of these people used to eat anything. So there was really no limit, and Quran, anything that is bad, Islam does not forbid except something that is really the nature of a human being rejects it. حرمت عليه الميتة والدم لحم pig's meat, things that are slaughtered for something else, not for Allah. المنخنق الموقوذة المتردية, the one that fall from the mountains. Natiha, the one that was hit by another animal. The one that was caught by wild animals, except if you manage to slaughter it before it dies, etc. And this Madubih al Nusub, they used to slaughter things for the idols they were worshipping. And Tastaqsim bil Azlam, there was some sort of gambling that they used to do, and that involves livestock, and that also was forbidden. You are also forbidden. No. You are also forbidden to allot shares or meat by drawing marked arrows. This is the Tastaqsim bil Azlam. A heinous practice. The disbelievers have already lost all hope that they will give up your religion. يعني اليوم يئس الذين كفروا من دينكم فلا تخشوهم واخشون اليوم أكملت لكم دينكم وأتممت عليكم نعمتي ورضيت لكم الإسلام دينا. Today disbelievers gave up, because remember, this was really in the beginning it was only few people, and there was hope for the disbelievers to suppress and kill this new message and new movement. But especially after some people went to Habasha or Abyssinia, and in Medina we had another stronghold. Of course, that became impossible, which is to kill completely this new movement or new message. So today, they have already lost all hope. They will give up your religion. Do not fear them. Fear me. لا تخشوهم واخشون وليتم اخشون اليوم أكملت لكم دينكم وأتممت عليكم نعمتي ورضيت لكم الإسلام دينا. I have perfected today. I have perfected your religion for you, completed my blessings upon you, and chosen as your religion Islam, total devotion to Allah. Of course, this is the biggest blessing. I mean, the favors of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala are countless, but the biggest blessing is this, the religion itself. So, أكملت وأتممت عليكم نعمتي ورضيت لكم الإسلام دينا. We should be very grateful to Allah that He gave us this great faith and great guidance, and that's part of and essential part of the favors of Allah. اليوم أكملت لكم دينكم وأتممت عليكم نعمتي ورضيت لكم الإسلام دينا. فمن اضطر. This is continuation of the rules. There are things that are forbidden except in case of necessity. فمن اضطر في مخمصة غير متجانف لإثم فإن الله غفور رحيم. But if any of you, this is continuation of that these things are forbidden, but if any of you is forced by hunger to eat forbidden food with no intention of doing wrong, then Allah is most forgiving and merciful. It tells you the mercy and the flexibility of this religion, that all of these things are forbidden. But if you are in a situation where you fear that you're gonna be harmed, or you're gonna die of hunger or thirst, etc., then you are allowed to eat these things to save lives, because there are priority in Islam. I mean, saving lives is a top priority. So everything else becomes a detail when it comes to saving your own life. Of course, there are so many, there are difference of opinions about almost everything in Islam. That tells you how powerful this religion is, and accept different interpretations so that it can keep up not only with differences of contexts and cultures and situations, but also with the evolution of life. Some people say you eat only or you drink the minimum just to survive. Some people say you can eat until you are full. Some people say you can even take some of it or to save it for future, whatever. I mean, again, we're going to see the same thing in wudu, the same thing that are in tayammum, when, and etc. Very lot of flexibility, and everybody who's trying to make this deen very rigid, that there is only one opinion about everything, they are really, they think they're serving the deen or protecting it. They're actually causing it harm, because the deen, its greatness is in its simplicity and its flexibility and its consistency with the inner nature of a human being. And then يسألونك ماذا أحل لهم قل أحل لكم الطيبات وما علمتم من الجوارح مكلبين تعلمونهن مما علمكم الله فكلوا مما أمسكنا عليكم واذكروا اسم الله عليه واتقوا الله إن الله سريع الحساب. They ask you, I mean, these people were asking. Remember, these people, they made a commitment to pursue Ridwanullah, Tiba' Ridwanullah, whatever it takes. So they were asking for directions. They were asking for guidance. Should we do this? What is expected? What are the expectations? How can we meet the expectation? What is our mission? How can we fulfill it? What is the purpose of Allah? How can we make it happen? That's the spirit of the companions. So, and this is one of those questions. They ask you, Prophet, what is lawful for them? So say all good things are lawful for you. Another confirmation that the norm is for things to be lawful. All good things are lawful for you. This includes what you have taught your birds and beasts of prey to catch. This is something that a practice that was common at that time, that they train some birds or beasts to catch animals for them. And they at least some opinions or scholars say the Bismillah, you say it when you when the animals that you trained goes to catch, that's when you say Bismillah, because sometimes when catching the animals, the animals can die. So that's, I mean, again, this is something that probably does not really apply a lot to us. Teaching them, but subhanAllah, even in this very little detail, it reminds you of something very important about your relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Teaching them as Allah has taught you. It's amazing, this Quran, even in some very small detail, it reminds you that anything good that you have is from Allah. وَمَا بِكُم مِّن نِعْمَةٍ فَمِنَ اللَّهِ مَا أَصَابَكَ مِنْ حَسَنَةٍ فَمِنَ اللَّهِ. These animals that you are teaching them, because Allah has taught you. So teach them teaching them as Allah has taught you, that every knowledge you have is from Allah. Every money you have is from Allah. Every power you have is from Allah. And remember, that's the test in which Qarun failed. When he was told that this is أحسن كما أحسن الله إليك, he said, no, that's my money. When he was told to spend from the money that Allah has given him, he said, no, that's قال إنما أوتيته على علم عندي. And I made this wealth because I was smart business person. I know how to make money. So Quran is telling us, even those animals that you train to catch animals for you, prey, these are, whatever you're teaching them is Allah who has taught you that. So eat what they catch for you, but first pronounce Allah's names over it. This is when you say Bismillah before the animals goes to catch the. Be mindful of Allah again. Wattaqullah. So the previous verse, Wattaqullah inna Allah shadidul iqab. The first verse finishes by Inna Allah yahkum ma yurid. The previous one, فَإِنَّ اللَّهَ غَفُورٌ رَحِيمٌ, and this one, وَاتَّقُوا اللَّهَ إِنَّ اللَّهَ سَرِيعُ الْحِسَابِ. I told you that this Quran is a book of Tawheed. Is meant essentially to strengthen your relationship with Allah. Be mindful of Allah. He is swift to take account. And even those warnings of punishment, that's from the mercy of Allah. Why? Because Allah wants you to wake up now and take care of things before suffering. Not suffering in the hereafter, but also suffering even in this life. So it is even the verses that talk about punishment and warns us against punishment, these are out of the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Why? Because maybe if the verses about rahmah were not enough to get you to do the right thing, Quran is, Allah is trying the other tool, which is, or Quran is trying the other tool, which is to warn you against punishment. So the combination of the two may keep you on the right track. Incentives and also deterrence. واتقوا الله إن الله سريع الحساب. اليوم أحل لكم الطيبات. Again, everything that is good. وطعام الذين أوتوا الكتاب حل لكم وطعامكم حل لهم والمحصنات من المؤمنات والمحصنات من الذين أوتوا الكتاب من قبلكم إذا آتيتموهن أجورهن محصنين غير مسافحين ولا متخذي أخدان. So these are things that are lawful. The food of the people of the book is lawful for you, as your food is lawful for them. So are chaste believing women, as well as chaste women of the people who were given the scripture before you, as long as you have given them their dowries and married them, not taking them as lovers or secret mistresses. Now, this requires some reflections here. But the religion of Islam is very inclusive, as we know that everybody who comes to Islam, I mean, it can melt races, social classes, whatever, gender, etc. Very inclusive religion. Why? Because it made the criterion is taqwa. Inna akramakum indallahi atqakum. That nobody is better than anybody else because this is man or woman, or because this is black or white, or this is no. It's inna akramakum indallahi atqakum. The best amongst you is the more pious, is the one who does more, who is better in deeds, and of course with the sincerity. Now that's among Muslims, but Quran is very clear about integrating the people of the book and giving them that special status. Part of the integration was making the food lawful, and marriage is making marriage lawful. So it was always there is always hope that the people of the book, they should, or they will realize one time or one day that this is just a continuation of what they're having. This is not a different religion. So there is the special status they have, and part of the special status is this mechanism of integrating the people of the book in the community by making the food lawful. And keep in mind that these were living together. In Medina, they were living together. And again, Quran is building a society. Remember, the constitution that the Prophet ﷺ wrote in Medina was that the state that was established in Medina was a state based on constitution and citizenship. And that's probably the first in history, based on constitution and citizenship. Everybody in the Medina is a citizen. And it was not tribal, and it was not even a community based on religion. These people who are living together, they have this document. It is a social contract, and they have equal rights and equal. So part of integrating the people of the book was this great role, actually, of making the food lawful and making also marriage lawful. And again, of course, the verses, as usual, Quran always, whenever it gives you a rule, usually it starts by waking you up, getting your attention, and most of the time it ends either with an incentive to encourage you to do things, or with a warning or deterrence from violating that. That's the style of the Quran, so that wherever you open the Quran and you read, if you read properly with reflection, you will find yourself spiritually recharged. Vision is much more clear. You will find yourself reminded of things that you probably have forgotten or faded. I mean, it is really, it's an amazing book that I wonder how we can afford not to have that regular relationship and moments to read Quran, and not read for the sake of quantity, but read and reflect. This is a personal message that was sent from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to you through Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So you read it as such, to know what are the expectations, what are the directions, where am I failing, where am I doing good, so that I can preserve it and strengthen it, which parts I need to fix, etc. That's how Quran, that's what the Quran does. It's basically, you see yourself in the mirror to take care of yourself physically, but you read the Quran to take care of yourself spiritually, so that it will shed some lights on your faith, on your manners, on your relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, etc., so that you can keep whatever is working and strengthen it, and fix whatever is not working. So these verses, they conclude by the deeds of anyone who rejects faith will come to nothing. وَمَنْ يَكْفُرْ بِالْإِيمَانِ فَقَدْ حَبِطَ عَمَلُهُ. And in the hereafter, he will be one of the losers. Again, that's the style, the regular style of the Quran, of motivating and also deterring you from, keeping you from, helping you restrain yourself from doing something that is wrong. Let's stop here and see if there are questions or comments. And the next verse is about the Salah. So depending on how it goes, we may go back to it either this time or next time, inshallah. Anybody?
السلام عليكم.
وعليكم السلام ورحمة الله وبركاته.
جزاك الله خير يا دكتور. والمحسنات من المؤمنات والمحسنات من الذين أوتوا الكتاب. Can you explain this? That mean they can marry from us, from Muslims, or only the marriage?
The verse is addressing, at least the literal meaning is that Muslim man can marry a woman from the people of the book.
Is it
because muhsanatu, not muhsan, it's still talking about women.
okay.
So muhsanatu من المؤمنات والمحصنات من الذين أوتوا الكتاب. And that's the general agreement or consensus, is that Muslim man is allowed to marry a Christian or a Jew.
جزاك الله خير.
Assalamu alaikum, Dr. Anushi.
Alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Dr. Anushi, some Christian countries slaughter their animals, different techniques. Yet they are still Christian countries. What's your thought about that? When do we? I know some groups in Muslim groups are very strict when it comes to that. Some say if it's a Christian country, you're fine. What do you think?
I don't want to get into fiqh because things have to be studied extensively and covered, also discussed extensively. Otherwise, it's going to be like partial discussion. But the biha, the rule is the people of the book. The food of the people of the book is lawful. Nobody can restrict that except for yourself. If you are not comfortable, if someone is more comfortable limiting themselves to things that are slaughtered Islamically, you have that option. But nobody can come and tell people that, no, these are different people of the book, that's a different way, or different this and different that. The purpose of allowing the food of the people of the book, I think it's has to be studied further so that people will not be lost in the details. And that's part of the flexibility of Islam. This is what you can do, but if you want to restrict it for yourself, you can do that for yourself. But the food of the people of the book is lawful. That's the rule. It cannot be more explicit than this. وَطَعَامُ الَّذِينَ أُوتُوا الْكِتَابَ حِلٌّ لَكُمْ. So if you are asked, you should give people whatever is available. For yourself, you can apply whatever you are comfortable with. But we should not impose our own views on people. When somebody comes and asks, we should tell people this is okay and that's okay, and it's up to you.
Assalamu alaikum, Dr.
Alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
In the last year or so, the official for American cemetery, especially in our area, reaching our masajid, offering spaces in their cemeteries for Muslims. And I ask myself why. And last, I have two friends pass away Christian, and both of them, they cremation for them. And I think this one of the reason why cemetery reaching for Muslims to have business, because the business from American community is going down. Why in Islam we are not allowing cremation? What is the reason, if any reason or no?
I really don't know. I mean, this is something totally new for us. I mean, we never thought about it. I personally never looked or read or searched about it, but it's a good question. I mean, we may look into it and see if there are anybody who wrote about it or did any study about it.
Also, Brother Muhammad, he gave us link to listen to one Turkish writers, and I listened not all of it, about half an hour out of it. And he mentioned the Quran talk a lot about what you are mentioned in last two khutbahs about justice, about adala. And he asked, what is the justice? I didn't finish all the YouTube, but his question, I think, strange, because I think justice, it's clearly for anyone, right?
I mean, it's asking about the meaning of justice.
Yeah. Or the Quran mentioned justice. What is the meaning of justice in Quran?
I mean, justice is one of those very loaded words. Basically, some people defined in Arabic by saying "أعطى كل ذي حق حقه," to give everybody their dues or their right dues, or so it's very loaded word. It applies at very different levels. Starting, as I explained in this last khutbah, starting from you being fair with everybody, old or young, strong or weak, powerful or weak, whatever. Starting with you being fair and just with everybody, and not to allow anything to make you cause you to make you biased. That's one. And then standing for justice, which means that as Muslims, we are not allowed to be passive, even if there is a situation of injustice, where it doesn't matter first Muslims or non-Muslims involved. There is only one standard. Even if there is a situation of injustice that you can't do much about it, you still at least have to the adaf al-iman, which is the lowest level, which is to reject it in your heart and to keep that sensitivity and rejection of all forms of injustice, regardless of who is doing it against whom. It starts from you being just, fair, goes to stand up for justice, fair with everybody, including with those who have transgressed against you in the past or you don't like them, as we have seen, and then going all the way to be actively advocating for justice and working against any case of injustice. So that's, probably the way. This is something that we can go on and on and on to talk about it, but justice is very essential in Islam. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in Surah Al-Hadid says that all the revelations and messengers were sent for the sole purpose, and that's important. لقد أرسلنا رسولنا بالبينات وأنزلنا معهم الكتاب والميزان ليقوم الناس بالقسط. That we sent messengers and books and revelations so that justice is served and justice prevails. So we need to do a lot of work to bring this idea of justice at the heart of our religion, because the verse makes it clear that that's the ultimate goal, and we have to apply it in our own lives, and then stand up for justice for everybody, and not necessarily when Muslims are victims, then we are maybe active. And sometimes even this you don't find, sometimes even when people are not really, they become very indifferent or passive, but it shouldn't be limited to only when Muslims are victims. It should be applied even when Muslims are the ones who are committing injustice against somebody else. Doesn't matter. There is only one standard in Islam when it comes to justice.
Okay, Dr. Suhail. It's personal issue, but I think it's well spread in our community about the mahar to the wives. First, do I have to pay the mahar to my wife after 35 years in marriage? You know, when we stand to the judge, we say the mahar is blah blah, and we say in Arabic al-maqbood. We didn't pay it. I didn't pay it. My wife always hit me. You have to pay my mahar. You have to give me my mahar. We never thought about to pay it. You know, what is the rules here? Also, when I married my wife, her mahar was 120,000 Syrian pound. That time was a lot of money. Right now, I take her to McDonald's. We pay dinner for me and her. It's more than her mahar.
These are again very detailed fiqh issues, and I'm not really faqih, but the general rule for spousal relationship is whatever you agree about. وإن امرأة خافت من بعدها نشوزا أيضا فلا جناح أن يصلح بينهما صلحا والصلح خير. So it's really not about anybody to be interfering. It's about the two spouses to agree on something. And Quran, Islam endorses any agreement between spouses. I mean, whatever compromise or agreement they can reach that is reasonable and fair, and both of them are accepting it. So that I think applies in this case. Is just don't go and look for fiqh, because between spouses, the principle or the approach should be always to find a compromise and to find an agreement and solution, and not to turn the house into like always who's right, who's wrong. Let's find out, and what is my right, and then it becomes like a court. That's not a family anymore. So it shouldn't be everybody should be driving their families and their houses in the direction of agreement, consensus, building compromises, etc., and not in this argumentation of no, it was not, let's find out, let's ask someone. If that becomes frequent, then there is a serious problem. The problem is much more severe and deeper, and therefore the roots of the problem have to be tackled. These are become only the symptoms of the problem, not the root cause.
Assalamu alaikum, Dr. Far.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
The haram in the Quran is clear, but when we look at the seerah of what you call the sunnah, and you see a lot of haram, okay, there, even much bigger. So the way the Quran said, "Ma atakum rasul fakhudhuhu wa ma nahakum anhu fantahu." It's here in the maqam of nahi. So what's the difference between the haram in the Quran and what's in the sunnah?
That's a very good question and big question. And I strongly doubted that if there is something very serious, that Quran will not mention it and will leave it for Sunnah to. And I strongly doubted that Quran will leave anything that is solid and foundational, etc. So, and when it comes to Sunnah, it's a reality that it is about time to talk about it openly and not to be intimidated or afraid from people to talk about Sunnah. Both the Seerah of Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam and his Sunnah, means his Hadith and his action, etc. The way they are documented, especially the Sunnah, it's unfortunately we always miss the middle course, and we always go to one extreme and keep like a pendulum, go between extremes. Some people call for rejection completely of the Sunnah, and some people call for to make Bukhari and Muslim like the Quran. Both are wrong. I mean, we have to realize that the documentation of the Hadith happened about 200 to 300 years after the death of Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. It happened with a very primitive tools. It happened under dictatorial regimes, and that can put question mark on any hadith that was mentioned about politics. Like, for example, obey your emir or your leader, even if they take your money, even if they beat you, etc. I cannot accept hadith like this, even if you find it in Bukhari and Muslim everywhere. Yeah. I cannot accept, because if they put that in the context, and that's totally against the essence of this deen about justice and accountability. And you have seen how the Khulafa al-Rashidin, they were held accountable, and people used to discuss even with the Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. And you tell me somebody come after them, you just obey them, obey this ruler or leader blindly and totally, even if they abuse their power? Cannot accept that. So we have to put things in context. The biggest mistake that we have done is always out of good intention. We are afraid that people will reject Sunnah altogether. So let's make it perfect. It's not perfect. The work of Bukhari and Muslim, great work. They spent so many years and so much efforts to scrutinize 600,000 hadith. 600,000 hadith, they came up with those couple thousands. Can anybody who has any science background knows that this operation cannot be 100%? You do an experiment in the lab, physical experiment, it cannot be 100%. There is always something called margin of error. There is a margin of error. Now, what is the margin of error for Bukhari? Well, I don't know, but there is a margin of error. Now, how to deal with it? There are several ways we can deal with it. By the way, Bukhari himself, in the way he documented his hadith, there was some signals. There are some hadith different than others. There are some hadith where there is a solid chain, and some hadith, Bukhari starts them in a way to tell you that this particular one, there was some sort of question or doubt about it. There is haddathana, and there is, I forgot that, but there are two ways he starts the hadith. And one of them is to tell you that that particular hadith is of lower quality or reliability, internal authenticity than the others. One. Second, which is the biggest mistake that we made, is that we focused only on the chain of narration, not on the content. And we had, the problem is not Bukhari, by the way. The problem is the people who come after that. It's like the schools of thought. The problem has never been between Malik and Abu Hanifa and Shafi'i. They respect each other. You don't know who is the teacher of whom. So much respect between them. But their followers, their blind followers, is the ones who had at certain point in time in Damascus 4 prayers, every prayer for every school of thought, because people don't pray behind one another and they don't marry from one another, etc. It's a mess. It's always the followers. We had people who came after Bukhari, and they took this route, which is very dangerous, that every hadith in Bukhari is authentic. Even if it contradicts a verse of Quran, we have to find some sort of interpretation to make them consistent, to make it authentic. Why? We didn't have to. hadith that is not really respectful to the Prophet. And there are some authentic hadith, they call them authentic. They project the Prophet in not in a respectful way, by the way. And these hadith are in Sahih. A hadith that is not consistent with the maqasid of this deen, with the overarching goals of this deen, with the essence of this deen, contradicts one verse, clear meaning, clear contradiction, why we should accept it? And why we should keep it? Just because it was in Bukhari and because we are afraid to say that if Bukhari is only 95% or 90% correct, then this whole deen is going to collapse. Islam is not that fragile, by the way. We should forget about this idea that Islam, it's like in a baby incubator, and we are afraid that anything that is done to Islam, it's gonna collapse. We should abandon this attitude. That's the attitude that killed ijtihad. People don't want to come close to ijtihad. Why? Because we are afraid for our religion to collapse or to disintegrate or etc. Until now, you have people who say, who still believe in hukm al-radda, that the one who becomes a Muslim and then decide to abandon Islam, they say he should be killed. Until now. And why they say? Because they are afraid that people can start play games against Islam and then they can come and leave. Islam is not that weak and it is not that fragile. Do you want to keep Muslims in their religion just because they are afraid of this rule? So it is about time to change our attitude. Going back to specifically to your question, I think it's anything that is not haram in Quran and then made haram in Sunnah has to be discussed and has to be searched clearly, especially if it is foundational, if it is something that is foundational, because again, the way the seerah, especially the seerah, by the way, the seerah even worse than the Sunnah. The seerah, all of the seerah is built based on Ibn Hisham and Ibn Ishaq, and these are full of stories that are not authentic.
Especially like the regime, because involve killing, somebody who will commit zina, okay, or متزوج and it's married. It doesn't make sense that in the Quran is not mentioned, and in the Sunnah it's mentioned, and it's involved ruh here, involves soul of somebody to kill.
That's you're right. That's one of a really very good example that something like this would not be not mentioned in Quran, and then we should not. I mean, there is, and I'm very comfortable with the rule. By the way, there are mainstream Muslims scholar nowadays say there is no rajm in Islam. There is no stoning in Islam. Yeah.
Jazakallah khair.
I mean, it's really, it's a great religion, very intertwined, very inspiring, very empowering. It's really very different than the way that we inherited it as few rituals and few haram and few fiqh rules with no connection between them. We pray, we don't know why we're praying. We fast, we don't know because we just found everybody fasting. That's not the religion that was preached by Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam and produced that great individuals and that great community and that great success story. We're gonna have to look for that lost, original, true Islam, because it is very different than the way we understand it and practice today.
One more thing is related to what Brother Muhammad said, is about the Turkish writer or thinker. He mentioned something that the laws in the Quran is like it came from the community itself, okay, and it's like the cutting the ceiling and cutting the hands, and also the earth, inheritance and stuff. It's coming from the society, and the society from in the Jazeera Arabia is completely different from the society in somewhere else. What I think what he mean by that, it's like what the society apply, who can apply it, but it's based at least on the Quran. If somebody steal, it means that we have to apply something on it, so we have to prevent that. If the inheritance, because inheritance from country to another country is completely different. This is what the writer is thinking about, and he's talking about this. What do you think? What's your opinion about it?
And this is very, I mean, we can dedicate a whole session to this. That's a very important point. This idea of ijtihad, unless we really bring it and put it on the table and discuss it and stop thinking about it as a taboo that we don't touch, it's a couple of things. One is that we should always try to achieve the goals of Islam, al-maqasid, as by respecting as much as possible the thawabit, which are the constant. The big question is, what are these thawabit? For me, the thawabit, the most important constant, are the goals of Islam. Now, there are some texts, clearly, like cutting the hands of a thief. That's a text in Quran. That's in Quran. Are these open for ijtihad? For me, yes. Are they open for ijtihad, that is random ijtihad, anybody at any time and cancel? Or no. I'm talking about the authentic ijtihad, which is what will achieve, what is muradul shara, yani what is the purpose of Allah? What is it that Allah wants to achieve? And is this particular tool now is the one that can achieve that and can achieve it in every society on earth, in every context, or not? That's the big question. And I always come back to say, Umar ibn Khattab, who were still in Medina and is still few years after the death of Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. We're talking about the same era, the same part of the world, the same culture, the same everything. And he made ijtihad about texts. Things, al-mu'allafati qulubuhum is a text. Giving money, part of the spoils of the war, giving it to those tribes or tribe leaders that the Muslims did not want them to join the enemies. He stopped it, even though it is part of the text. He suspended cutting the hands because of the famine too. He distributed the spoils of the war in a different way. It used to be 80% for the soldiers, 20% for the treasure. He said no, soldiers are gonna get salaries. They're not, and these are verses of the Quran. Why? Because these people, they were not afraid to think about what is the essence of the deen. Yes, we need to abide by the text, but not to make the text violate the purpose. I mean, if Umar ibn Khattab distributed the spoils of the war on the soldiers, when they get the Persian Empire and the Roman Empire, all Iraq and all Iran and all Damascus and Sham in 1 week, it would be crazy. It would be crazy to distribute this among the soldiers. Yeah. He did not do it. This is not this. He said this rule applies when the spoils were like a horse or camels and shields and the swords, etc. Yeah, but we cannot apply it like this in this case. So all what I'm saying is it's about time to be brave and courageous, that we can do ijtihad not ijtihad to shop around, not to relax the religion and make it light and make it fat-free or no. To actually look for how can we achieve the purpose of Allah? How can we figure out what is that Allah wants to achieve and achieve it? Cutting the hands of the thief happened. Remember that the Quran always has that dual role. Quran always dealing with that reality at that time and find solution for those people. The Quran cannot talk to the people of the Arabian Peninsula at that time and give them solutions that are suitable only for the 20th century. Talk to them about cybersecurity. It doesn't work. So Quran had the dual role of dealing with that reality, at the same time stating principles that are valid for all times and all places. Which is which? That's what you have to find out. Now, cutting the hands of the thief happened at a time when there is no way for that society to build the prison and have people in the prison and then keep feeding them and sponsor and taking care of them, because these people, they were fighting for survival at that time. There was no such thing. For example, inheritance happened at the time. It was a major, very progressive step for a woman who didn't have any right. They were buried alive, didn't have any right, and then when women had no responsibility before, and then was given half a set. I'm not saying that take it easy and keep changing these rules. All of them saying is putting them on the table for the sincere purpose, not to shop around, not to find discounts or to mess up with our religion. No, it's the other way around. It's to find out what is more pleasing to Allah at this moment, what will achieve the goals of Islam at this moment, that goal of justice, the overarching goals of Islam. And if this rule, and by the way, there is a big progress. There are mainstream scholars nowadays who are no longer afraid to say things that used to be taboo. Now, for the first time, we start hearing mainstream scholars saying there is no jihad or aggressive jihad. There is no such thing as you go and attack people. That's Qardawi said it recently in his book of Jihad in Islam. That said there is no jihad talab in Islam, period. There is no such thing as Muslim feel strong, they go and attack. If it happened at the time of Khulafa al-Rashidin or happened at the history of Islam, it has to be taken in that context. That's not a religion. That's not deen. That's political decision. There may be good decisions, but at that time when there were no borders, no treaty, no international law, no nation state, nothing. Everybody was expanding. So, and then for the first time, we start hearing mainstream scholars say, if the maslaha, if the greater good comes in disagreement with the text, maslaha should take priority. And that's something nobody will dare because of the Salafi intimidation. Nobody would have dared saying this like a while ago. Now you have mainstream scholars saying that if the maslaha, the greater good comes in disagreement, with the text, the priority should be, and that's what Umar ibn Khattab did. That's what Umar ibn Khattab did a couple of years after the death of Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, when he saw the maslaha, the greater good, is not consistent with that text. Remember, that text is great, was meant to fix situation there and also to inspire our ijtihad. When he found that the maslaha, the greater good, in disagreement with the text, he gave priority to the greater good, to the maslaha.
جزاك الله كل خير دكتور سيد. ان شاء الله we see you next Sunday باذن الله. السلام عليكم.
السلام ورحمة الله وبركاته.